Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you're joining from. Thank you for joining this important webinar today. So we're just going to give at least 2 to 3 minutes for everyone to join. Thank you. All right, thank you very much. All right, for those of us that are online, would appreciate if you can take a moment to drop your name and where your location, where you're currently at, your location in the chat box, please. Please drop your name and where you're joining us from. So while we do that, I'll proceed to introduce myself. My name is Banjo Oluwaseyi, and I'll be your moderator for this session. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Kunle from Germany. We can see you. Debbie Daramola from Lagos, thank you for joining. Rena from Benin, Edo State, thank you for joining. Ademola Ogusheson from Bonny Island, thank you for joining us. Ukayat Ali from Lagos, thank you for joining. Oye Dotson from Canada, thank you for joining us this morning. David from Lagos, thank you for joining us. John Ude from Lagos, thanks for joining us. Please keep the message coming. Okay, so today we have outstanding lineup of speakers that are prominent leaders in the field of ESG and sustainability, and they'll be sharing with us their expertise and giving us more insights regarding the evolving ESG reporting and risk management. And our topic today is harnessing the ESG strategy, reporting and risk nexus. Without further delay, we'll proceed now, and I'll hand over to the CEO of Sterling One Foundation, Mrs. Olapeju Ibekwe, for the welcome remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shay. Thank you to everyone for joining us from different parts of the globe. I want to say thank you for joining us for the fourth in the series of the webinars on ESG. First, I would like to sincerely appreciate our partners who have made a commitment to support the entire ecosystem on ESG knowledge sharing. I would like to start by appreciating the Lagos Business School Sustainability Center, the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, UNIDO Investment Technology and Promotion Office, PwC, the NGX Group, and Sterling Bank. Thank you so much for joining us on this year-long webinar series on ESG. Today, we have the privilege to have excellent speakers in the room. We're going to be having goodwill messages from the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We're going to be having a goodwill message also from the Director General, Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, and we'll have our speakers, Mrs. Bolanle Adekoya from PwC, and the Head of Sustainability and ESG for the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority, and that is Nana Maidugu. The topic, of course, is harnessing the ESG strategy, reporting, and risk nexus. And my assignment today is to welcome everybody, one. Two, to also let us know that I am particularly interested in today's session because it's going to be quite practical. If there's anyone in the room that is still struggling on how to draft an ESG strategy for your organization, integrate the ESG strategy into your operations, report your ESG metrics properly, and ensure there is adequate risk management in the execution of your ESG strategy. This session is definitely for you. So please, you can still share the links with your family and friends and colleagues that need to be in this room. And I'm rounding up my welcome to say, please keep your pen and paper by your side or your laptop. Let's go on and have this exciting learning journey. Wishing you all the best. Thank you for joining us.
All right, thank you very much, Olapiji Bikwe. And we'll move on to our first goodwill message from our partner, the Director General NECA, Mr. Adewale Oyenrede. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning, colleagues. Good morning, everyone, on this journey, this very interesting ESG journey. We have it coming for a long time, and really want to appreciate Stanley One for blazing the trail in this very important conversation. So I will stand on the existing protocol, but diving straight into my goodwill message, as we call it. First, to appreciate anyone for this wonderful opportunity for us to be part of this conversation. We cherish your partnership. We cherish the drive at which, or the pace and drive at which you are taking this conversation. Without going into the intricacies of ESG, I would like to highlight the concept, the importance, and the necessity for all of us to join this very important movement, and it's becoming fundamental to business operations, not only within Nigeria, but globally. We had a very important session 3 days ago with the International Labour Organization, and the big importance of ESG to business sustainability, not only in the short and medium term, but in the long term, also came to bear seriously. So interestingly, global evidence have also shown that sustainability to be foundational to access of various forms of green funds, investment decisions, and commercial relationships for enterprises across the world. We have realized, and evidence have also shown, that if you really want to remain competitive, not only within the realm of sustainability, but to remain close to the path of competitiveness in the real sense of it, then our attitude, our disposition, our perspective about this conversation on ESG, on sustainability must change, and it must change quickly. Unfortunately, Africa and indeed Nigeria appear to be at the backseat of this opportunity for green fund, the opportunity to leverage on this conversation. We seem to be a bit laid back in it. This may be explained by either limited awareness, which we have seen, lack of skill required to engage ESG, or our general dogmatic way to change. A record have also shown that of the over 800 billion investment in green and other sustainable bonds in 2022, only a mere 0.8% accrue to Africa. And you can imagine what is accruing to Nigeria if only 0.8 accrued to Africa as a whole. So we commend Standing One for this very important step for the drive. And you can be rest assured that we'll continue to deepen our partnership, deepen our engagement, and deepen our collaboration on this very subject matter. As we continue to partner and also leverage on our international partners on this conversation, we also look forward to dragging everybody within the ecosystem, or everybody that this conversation will affect, and everybody that have the potential to also contribute to this conversation, will also drag them along. So thank you once again, Standing One. Thank you, Peju. Thank you for all the speakers. We are also looking forward to a very deep engagement, even as this session continues. Thank you once again, and I wish all of us a very interesting and engaging session.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Diwali. We do appreciate you, and we appreciate your partnership and collaboration with our team. And we also look forward to more or further collaboration with your team on other areas. Thank you very much, Mr. Diwali Smart. So please, let's use the react button to show our appreciation to Mr. Diwali. Okay, so while we do that, we are going to take the next goodwill message from Mrs. Aderonke Adeyegbe, the chairman of Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, SDG and Business Committee. Let's welcome her. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you all. It's a pleasure to be here. And on behalf of the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I wish to acknowledge and appreciate the invitation to be part of this very laudable project. We're proud of the fact that we're part and parcel of this initiative. We've been part of the ESG webinar series, and we're very pleased to be partners with Sterling One. You will all agree with me that achieving the sustainable development goals by 2030 requires collaborations across all sectors, maybe private, public, and voluntary organizations, and that with the right political will, we'll be able to deepen partnerships, and we can collectively address the challenges, that the SDGs strive to address. At the Lagos Chamber, like you mentioned, what we're doing, we have an action plan for implementation of the SDGs, because we know how important the role of the chamber is across the region, and we are also striving to promote a more equal, prosperous, and sustainable society by aligning the 27 sectoral groups and the member companies of the Lagos Chamber to ensure that the SDGs are integrated into the businesses that are members of the chamber. And of course, at the back of this, is the achieve gender equality and empower all women, to develop. But this might be a challenge. We must emphasize here that there's a need for Nigeria to follow the global trend by upscaling its capacity and sharpening its strategies for initiating this very powerful project. Because it is important that the private sector takes the forefront in the call for integration of SDGs into business. And we are confident that with the collaboration between the Lagos Chamber and Sterling One, the contributions would impact on the nation and also improve the efforts to achieve SDG. I believe that other for you and shape improve the integration into businesses. And we appreciate a very session this morning. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Mrs. Aderonke, and we do appreciate the goodwill message, and we look further more to collaborating with your team and your organization. Thank you very much. So next, we are going to move into the subject matter for today, and our topic one for today is ESG reporting made easy, where we have our first speaker, Mrs. Bolanle Adekoya. Mrs. Bolanle Adekoya, she is part of PwC Africa leadership team, and she currently heads the corporate reporting services business for West Market Africa. Currently, she has over 23 years professional experience supporting clients through complex corporate reporting issues, deal structuring, capital raise transformation, financial and sustainability advisory across industries, power, oil and gas, manufacturing, and public sector. Bolanle has worked and led various projects across 4 continents, Asia, Europe, Africa, and North America. And she's a trusted business advisor to clients, and her expertise is drawn on across the PwC Global Network. Please let's welcome Mrs. Bolanle Adekoya.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me and see me.
Yes, we can hear you. We can also see
fabulous. You. Okay, so I'm glad to be doing this session because a lot of times when people hear ESG, people think it's something very complex. Yes, it has its complexities and there are quite a number of aspects to it. And people sometimes get afraid and say, you guys have come again, consultants, this and that. But ESG, as we've been talking about, that's why I'm very glad with what Sterling One Foundation are doing. We're trying to break it down in different sections. So over the next 20 to 25 minutes, I'm going to be talking about how we make ESG a lot more accessible and sort of understanding the various areas for it. So let me share my slides for this session. Please confirm that you can see my screen and that it is on presentation mode.
Yes, we can.
Okay, fabulous. So ESG reporting made easy. So let's just talk about ESG one more time. This is what ESG is. It's a component of sustainability and it has 3 pillars. We already know this. And it's important that because of this, these things are there as guidelines to help us to be able to do reporting. So what you will find is that apart from the normal sort of frameworks that we have heard about, I'm sure we talked about, people have heard about the GRI, things like the ISSB, CSRD, all these wonderful acronyms. If you are not there yet in your organization, there's actually quite a number of things that you're already doing that actually fall into these components. So it's important that you actually use these different concepts and components that are within the various pillars of ESG. Now, a lot of times people tend to focus more on the environmental pillar because that is the one people talk about: global warming, climate transition, climate change, circular economy. Those are the type of things that people tend to talk about. But it is more than that. So, for example, on the environmental pillar, you would look at the areas around how you use resources, which when we go on to my other slides, you will see that. And it's important that you understand when it comes to ESG making reporting, the one thing that you first need to get right is actually data. How you collect your data, how you process your data, and how you report your data. So the three things: how you collect your data, how you process your data, and how you report your data. And then I'll talk about what you need to consider in those things. So on the environmental pillar, it has to do with your resources. So what are the inputs into your organization? What are the things that you are, using to process what you are manufacturing or what you are giving up? So your inputs and your outputs, and also the byproduct of that process in that sense. So I'm just doing a few recap before I go into ESG Made Easy. So remember that. On the social pillar is looking at your stakeholders. How does it affect? So your stakeholders are looking at your customers, your your staff, people that are affected by the things that you do, even things around your vendor management, your supply chain. All of these things are very important. And then governance pillar. Now, the governance pillar, a lot of organizations tend to focus on profits when it comes to governance pillar and think about, it's about how I make money or how I report the money that I am doing. But however, it's a lot more than that. When you have the governance pillar, a lot of it is focused around accountability and the practices that you engage in that sense. Are you fair in what you're doing? Are you financially stable? Tax transparency, even the owners of the business. Well, who is the person in charge, and how do you tie their remuneration to what you are doing as an organization? So I just thought to give that as an intro before I then go into ESG reporting made easy. So what do you need to think about? So relevance of ESG. Let's talk about ESG. A lot of times, people do business because they want to make money. Last time I was here, I talked about the triple bottom approach, how it's important that we move away from profitability, that ESG, and that is what ESG is forcing us to do. Because business is no longer about making money, but it's about how the money is made. That is the fundamental issue. It's not just about making money, it's about how the money is made, the accountability side of things. So how are you accountable? How are you accounting? How do you deploy your resources? So what do you think? What are the things that you need to talk about in there? Now, you will notice in this session that I am doing, I'm not going to come here and give you, say, use that framework. The reason why I'm saying this is because there are so many ways of doing this to get to the right answer. And I think that it's important that you understand the why of this. So this session, as I said, ESG reporting made easy, is focusing on the why. So as a business, yes, you want to make money. Yes, you want to create wealth. but how are you doing it? So some of the key areas, your resources deployment. How do you source your resources? So the inputs into your business. So whether it's staffing, so employees, whether it is the raw materials that you're using it, the raw materials will include water and all those things. So how are you doing your resources? How do you process the resources? These are the things that you need to capture in your data. How do you do that? Now, organizations, they sort of have a framework. So the framework around data warehouse. How do you then warehouse your data? And we will talk about some steps that can help you with this, because for you to be able to do this ESG reporting, to have the data to be able to do the ultimate ESG reporting, you have to involve the whole organization. So your whole organization needs to be involved in that sense. I mean, we have a few people that do ESG here. So for example, if I look at someone like the head of ESG for NSIA, Nana, for her, it's not just about her organization, but it's also about everyone that is involved outside. Who are the other stakeholders in that sense? So it's about looking beyond, and you have to, as an organization, also identify who the actions of others that would affect what you do as an organization. So some of these things are very important. So what is my impact, both financial and non-financial, when it comes to my resources deployment? The other area is about measurement. So it's all well and good that we understand how I source, how do I process it, and what is the impact in there. What about the measurement? Can I track what I'm doing? Remember, as I said on this one, it's accountability that we're looking at. Have I identify, and can my processes address the needs of all my stakeholders? And then if something goes wrong, who can I hold responsible? Because at the end of the day, yes, you have leadership, the CEO, or whoever is involved, but who else can I hold responsible? Because as we mentioned in the last session, I remember I did, we talked about that some situations where you will find that some things are out of your control. So how can you get and make sure that everyone is following the policies and processes that you have put in place to make sure someone is held responsible and accountable? So there will be some areas that you need to ask them to do some disclosure. So your supply chain, your vendors, you would ask them to make sure that they are reporting on a periodic basis. So for example, I have some clients that will send us statements that we all need to sort of fill out and take, and to make sure that we're not things like we're not employing child labor, we're not destroying the environment, we're not engaging with organizations that are under sanctions, like, whether it is the UN sanction or a country-specific sanction. Those types of things, easily happen, and it's important that we all pay attention to this. So when it comes to date, accountability, resource deployment, and measurement. So that's one area. Another one is about how, when you're building in your ESG processes to be able to report, you make sure that around your ESG strategy, you think about how you can build trust, both in your stakeholders, all types of stakeholders. What does that mean? A lot of it has to do with transparency. Now, I know that a lot of organizations, some of the competitive advantage that you have, some of the competitive advantage you have are probably around some of these ESG strategies. And people do not want to sort of talk about them. But one of the things I say that we have moved away from where we are hiding some of these things, because there's a lot of issues around trust in the whole world. A lot of people know governments, whether it's the wars that are going on, even locally, the economic issues that we're facing, there's a lot of trust issues that people have against employers, employees, governments, regulators. There's so many things going on. People are suspicious of everyone, and there's a lot of things that are going on. So how then do you as an organization build trust? So a lot of it has to do with authenticity and truthfulness in some of the practices that you're engaging in. So do you know, let me give you an example. As an organization, a lot of times when you get something wrong, your tendency will be to probably hide it. But self-disclosure is usually better than somebody else finding out that you have done something wrong. So I'll give you an example. If you, for example, find out that one of your suppliers is involved in child labor, or they've gone to destroy somewhere in the environment, it's always better for you to sort of say that, you know what, we all know our strengths, we identified this, and this is how we are going to improve on it so that it doesn't happen again. So this is how you build trust. Because when people see that you are showing some of those vulnerabilities, yes, share prices may fall a little bit, but actually over time, resilience is built, and people then know that you are an organization that can be trusted. Yeah. And eventually it will promote sustainable growth over time. Understand your strengths as an organization. Are you allocating resources? Are you communicating this? Who is responsible for doing this? There are matrices that you can use. I'll talk about one of the matrices that is very, very simple to use, and it's quite an easy one that a lot of organizations have used over time. I'll talk about it shortly in that sense. But these things are foundations of how you then do, make reporting easy. What about contribution to corporate standing and reputation? Remember, at the end of the day, you want people to know that in your community that you are also making a difference, whether it's your corporate social responsibility, whether it's with your employees. So for example, one of the key ways of understanding whether you're doing the right thing by your employees is by having employee surveys. Are you doing that? For your investors, making sure that the type of data that you're providing to them to be able to make informed decisions, that they are authentic as well. Thinking about your competitors, yes, you do have to, of course, be careful about the trade secrets and things like that. Of course, we're not saying that you should put out your trade secret, but the idea is that people need to be able to understand that you are not just putting money first or profits first, but you are thinking about a holistic approach to how you do business. What other things do you need to think about making ESG reporting made easy? Remember, I said to you that I don't want us to a situation where I'm just here giving you one framework or the other, but I want you to focus on the why. So let's talk about investors. Every investor now will assess organizations. If you want anybody to invest in you or be a part of your vision, your bigger vision, every single one of them will want you to align with their own expectations. So it's important that when it comes to even your investment decision, how you spend money, you have to incorporate sustainable practices. What does that mean? Even if you're increasing financial returns, to an organization, if you, on a long-term basis, if you're not able to sustain it and you're destroying the environment, or that you're doing it where your staff, your employees, or your vendor, everyone is sort of talking the fact that you're not doing the right thing on the social aspects, in the long run, it doesn't pay off. So you need to incorporate. So when you're making investment decisions, there are assessments that you can do. So you can have a framework around how you do. So there's a checklist, you can look at to make sure that these things, as you mitigate risk and return, you are also making sure that you are doing ethical practices in that sense. And that's where it comes to the next thing around investor risk management. So a lot of people want you to give enough information around the impact of your practices, whether it's on your performance, your reputation, and the long-term value you are bringing. This will allow investors to make informed decisions on where to put their money. So recently, I was listening to an investment banker, one of the CEOs of an investment banker, and they said that they have a lot of money that they want to give to companies, but they're not able to give those companies because of the some of the ESG practices, especially on the social side. that that a lot of companies are ignoring the social aspect of the ESG pillars. And I asked him, what does that mean? He said that in social media, with the popularity of social media nowadays, it's very easy for them to find out and do their assessments of of companies, of how they are faring in social, on social. And I thought, oh, that's very interesting. That's true. Because guess what? Your staff, they can go on there and complain about one manager that's not doing well. They can talk about, gender inequalities. They can talk about maybe disability, maybe you don't have disability inclusion. So there are all these things that social media actually sort of talks out there, or things about not having fair pay, where people, you're using them and all the bosses are all getting the money and staff are not being paid well. So I thought to myself, actually, that's a very good point. So when it comes to this, you probably need to rethink how you look at your investor risk management and how you look at some of the non-financial risks on your performance and reputation that you may not have been aware of in that sense. So this is a good one. So now let's talk about what are the best practices and tools for ESG reporting. Earlier on, I mentioned already about the cross-departmental collaboration. You need to create a culture of collaboration. So do not, it's not just about your team that is responsible for sustainability and ESG. It's not about the finance function. It's not just about HR. It's not about marketing. It's not about the internal audit people. It's everybody. You need to remove silos. You need to come up with your ESG objectives as an organization. The first thing you do is create your ESG objectives as an organization, and then you move on to coming up with strategies to address those objectives. Once you do that, then it makes it easier for you to be able to collate data consistently, and also the quality of the data, so that you know that those are the things. And that is why, if you look at the terms of things like the GRI, ISSB, and all those other frameworks that are out there, they talk about you actually coming up with those sort of material impact areas, and also then coming up with the various objectives that you're trying to adhere to in that sense. And that is why they're looking at it, because first of all, there's some things that'll be that's more aligned for you and not for other area. For example, some organization, let's take the oil and gas industry. Tax is a big one for them, because of the very, very high tax areas. Maybe not so for an NGO. So everyone cannot have different materiality impact assessment, because at the end of the day, it's not there. And that is why you need to get everyone in your organization involved in it. So cross-departmental collaboration is very important. The next one is inclusion of stakeholders in ESG reporting. I mentioned this earlier on, that it's not just about what we do as an organization, but how we do it, and the stakeholders involved. Because now accountability and trust work hand in hand. So it's important that, so even when you have your AGMs or some of the investor calls that you may do, or even customers, let them know what you're doing. It will help you. So let the customer know that, oh, this year we reduced our carbon footprint. Oh, we have changed from CDG, or so we moved from fossil fuel, we're now doing gas, we've got that in there. Or my employees, you let your employee knows that, for example, even when it comes to the amount of money that you spend in different areas for your CSR, the fact that you're now doing certain areas, or that you're making your office more accessible. All of these things is very important, and you are able to, because it will really build trust and strengthen relationships for you, and people will want to be a part of what you're doing, making a difference. Even your employees will stay longer. They will stay longer in that sense. Then the other thing that we need to talk about, and we cannot ignore, is the place of technology in data collection. You all know, for all of you that have gone through this journey, the fact is that it is vast. ESG reporting, ESG compliance, ESG integration in the business, because of the vast area, you have to be able to leverage technology to help to make it easier, especially when it comes to data collection and analysis. So even things like, how do you then measure what is your GHG emissions? What does that mean for you? How do you do that? It's extremely it can be quite time consuming. You don't want people to just focus on Excel sheets. So you have to find a way of, looking at data collection. And so there are ways around it. So one thing I will say here, anybody that's interested, there is somebody called Robert Podjeski. So Robert Podjeski is a professor in a university, and he has put together what we call a sustainability or an ESG project management system that has some useful tools on how you can actually sort of start thinking about your data collection, looking at how you can project manage some of this area. So anyone that's interested in that, as I said, I try to stay away from us trying to say, one way is better than another, which is why I'm trying to, I don't want to be giving frameworks or tools. I just want to give best practices on what you should be doing, because as I said, there are so many ways of doing this as well. Even your organization may have even come up with ways of doing this. What other best practices can help for ESG reporting? Another one is the implementation of data management strategy. So it's all well and good that you have the data and you collected it and you've analyzed it. How do you then incorporate it into your business goals? How do you do that? You need to effectively manage data. So in your organization, you have to have people who are monitoring some of this data. Some of this data may not be useful anymore. They might have different shelf life. So you need somebody who is managing it, being able to sort of decipher and split it out, know what to do, refine the requirements in that sense. Which then leads me to the last one on the implementation of a data governance system. So you need to define the role, responsibility, the standards that you want, the controls that you want, especially around integrity and security. Because, for example, on the social part of this thing, GDPR, we all know about the Data Protection Act, comes in place here. So when people are doing self-disclosure or you are doing disclosure, how do you manage that so that you do not fall foul of regulatory compliance around that? So are you going to implement a data governance system? It's something that everyone needs, and it's something that you need to be able to monitor and check. So you might need to consider having a quality management system around this if you don't already have this. And your internal audit or your internal control function can actually take this up. But you might need to beef up the system, because if you're already doing that, how do you then beef up the system? For example, things like health and safety that maybe used to be outside of this, how do you bring those back in there as well? Things around fraud, how are you able to detect that? Things around phishing situation on your technology systems, computer system, how do you then deal with things? So there's a lot of things that you need to capture around your data governance as well. So that is my time up. As I said, it's supposed to be a simple, as we said, ESG reporting makes simple, focusing on the principles, focusing on a few best practices. As I mentioned earlier on, Robert Podjeski, he does have an ESG management system or framework. If you are interested in it, you can go and look at it. I find it quite easy to use. And then, of course, as I said earlier on, there are quite a number of other frameworks that are out there that you can also use in that sense. Any questions, please? Oh, I'm guessing there's a Q&A session, right, that comes up shortly.
All right, thank you so much, Mrs. Bolanle Adekoya, for such an insightful presentation. Please, let's make use of the react button to appreciate Mrs. Bolanle Adekoya.
I will type. I can see people are asking about this, the name of the person. I will type it in the group chat, so you can go and find him.
All right, thank you very much. For me, it was particularly a valuable presentation. I was able to learn the best practices and tools for ESG reporting, starting from the importance of cross-departmental collaboration to leveraging technology for data collections and others. Thank you very much. And next, we're still going to have you back for our second topic for today. That is after Mrs. Nana. However, our second speaker for today is Mrs. Nana Maidugo. She's the head of sustainability and ESG at Nigeria's Sovereign Investment Authority, where she's responsible for developing and driving NSIA's sustainability strategy and climate initiative, as well as implementation of NSIA's ESG framework across the authority, its investment and its partnership. She has been involved in the delivery and implementation of key national initiatives and development of national policies. Nana has antecedents at KPMG, a professional services firm where she worked in management consulting. She holds a bachelor's degree in computer system engineering from University of Kent and master's degree in oil and gas management from University of Dundee. Let's welcome Mrs. Nana Maidugo, and she will be taking us on practical sessions, step by step, and breakdown of how businesses can simplify the ESG reporting processes. Thank you.
Thank you, Shay, for that introduction, and good morning, everyone. Can you confirm that my audio and video are both good?
Very good.
Okay. Thank you. And Shay, could you please, what do you call it, share the slide, present the slide. Okay, so good morning again, everyone, and thank you for all dialing in. I'm happy to be here and to take us through this session, which basically highlights, practical steps, step by step of, simplifying ESG reporting. And I'll be also providing perspectives from lessons learned from my perspective in, preparing or driving NSI's ESG reporting efforts. So Bonali did an amazing job, speaking to us as to the why. So I'll touch a bit more on the why, and then we'll go to the how. So in terms of the outline, we'll just overview of, importance of ESG disclosures and reporting, and then we talk through the process, and then we highlight some critical success factors. So ESG disclosures, right? When you think of ESG reporting or ESG disclosures, it seems like it seems like something so difficult or this rocket science. But we're going to break it down, demystify it, and make it easy for everyone, regardless of the maturity of your organization. Now, why do we even want to report on our ESG performance or our ESG efforts? I know for a lot of organizations, the key drivers behind ESG disclosures is from a compliance perspective, particularly in regions that are more mature in terms of ESG regulations. So maybe, companies within the EU or, companies, in America and all of that. So there are strong regulations around ESG that require, those disclosures. But then thinking about it or bringing it home to the Nigerian context, right? While compliance regarding ESG disclosures is going to come into play soon, it's more than just reporting for compliance sake. right? Because if you're just doing it because, oh, I have to do it, then you're not able to get the value from it. And there are value adds or things you can get, or will I say advantages from advantages of ESG disclosures and ESG reporting. Now, the top one obviously is risk mitigation. There's a saying, you can't monitor what you don't measure. And for you to be able to, for you to disclose or report on your ESG or sustainability performance, then obviously there are certain things you have to track. And through that tracking and monitoring, you're able to assess your performance, assess how well you manage risk, even identify if you even manage those E&S, environmental and social risk, and how you can improve, your approach to environmental and social risk management. And in an ever-changing world where we see there's so many things going on. So whether it's macroeconomic instability, whether it's geopolitical tensions, everything. And because the world is so interconnected, something happening in one part of the world will affect you here. So it's important for organizations to build resilience, and being able to report or disclose on their ESG efforts helps, in strengthening your ESG and S risk management efforts, and in retaining resilience or remaining resilient in the face of these global uncertainties. Now, another one is access to markets and access to capital. I think I can tell you for free that in this climate right now, it would be difficult to access any pot of capital, without some level of ESG integration in your business. NSIA, for example, all our investments, whether they are climate investments, whether they're traditional infrastructure investments, whether they're fund managers, they all go through environmental and social assessments, and it's imperative for us to see that these businesses are integrating, ESG factors within, their strategy and within their day-to-day processes. And it mustn't be something so great or awesome. It's based on, the level, the kind of organization you are, the level of your maturity, the size of the organization. But it has to be there. And, if us, a Nigerian investor, is looking at it, you can imagine other investors, particularly when you look at globally, there's a lot of buckets of funding, available. But then when you look at the criteria required to tap into those funds, ESG integration is one of them. And so being transparent and reporting on your ESG efforts, helps with that, because when you want to tap into those funds, you already have, some information. You've already gathered some information on what you're doing, within the ESG space. And then even in terms of, access to global markets, you're competing, again, whether it's your goods or your services, you're competing with, in the global market, you'll be competing with organizations that operate in climes where there are ESG regulations. And so those organizations, by virtue of integration of ESG, they're already like a step ahead of you. You see there are new regulations now coming on board. One of them is the cross-border adjustment mechanism for the EU. So goods that are coming into EU the carbon tax is going to be applied to those goods, because with goods within the EU, or services and goods within the EU do get those taxes. So in order to, let's say, make it fairer and ensure that goods coming into that region are not more competitive, or goods within that region, organizations within that region are not at a disadvantage. So you see such things happening. And because, again, the world is becoming smaller. I say we're all integrated into each other. It's important, else you won't be able to compete against these other organizations that are already implementing this or reporting on their sustainability efforts. Another point, or another reason you should disclose on your ESG efforts is value creation. Now, ESG and sustainability, while they are closely linked, they're not completely the same thing, right? ESG is what I call it, subset of sustainability, or incorporating ESG helps, or enhances you achieving sustainability. So being able to incorporate this in your business and report on it helps you to be able to drive long-term value creation. So, and again, we know sustainability is not just about managing and identifying environmental, social, and governance. It's a broader concept, whether it's environmental stewardship, social responsibility, long-term value creation, resilience, economic viability. It's a broader concept. So this, incorporating and reporting on ESG helps with that. And then another point is brand reputation. Now, brand reputation can be quite tricky because what you see is there's some organizations where the ESG practice or the sustainability practice is under the marketing team or is under the comms team. Now, I don't want to go deep into that because I think that's a conversation for another day. That perhaps should be another topic that we should speak on. But then what happens is ESG and sustainability is a strategic enhancement tool. It's not just a marketing tool. So the risk of it sitting there or the risk of, incorporating ESG on just for brand reputation, could increase your chances of greenwashing, which is when you overemphasize, your ESG efforts because you want to be known as a brand or an organization, that is green or that is sustainable. So yes, ESG does help with brand reputation, but at the same time, you have to approach it strategically such that, you're not overemphasizing it and such that that is not the only reason that, you are disclosing your ESG efforts. And it does help with brand reputation because customer behavior is shifting. Now you see customers are becoming more aware of, sustainability and all, and you tend to see people going for certain goods or services because, those organizations have good sustainable practices. You would hear people say things like, "Oh, I'm going to buy, outfits from this brand because they use recycled fabric, for example," or "Oh, I'm going to stay at this hotel because they incorporate eco-friendly practices." So customer behavior is shifting as people are becoming more and more aware of ESG and sustainability. So disclosing your efforts moderately, not overemphasizing it, helps in building that trust with your customers, with your key stakeholders across board. So I think we've done a bit of justice to hammering why we should report on ESG. And then I'll just talk us through simple steps of how we can go about it. Now I broke this down into five key buckets just so we could simplify it and we could apply it to our respective businesses. I think a key thing, obviously, before you do anything, planning is important. So before you even start going into how to go about it, all of that, the key thing is planning. When do you want your reports to be ready? At what time do you want to be releasing your reports at the end of the year? Do you want it to be released alongside your financials? Do you want to do it on a quarterly basis? Do you want to do it so having that that plan and establishing those clear timelines as to when you want your report to go out, it helps with planning. You're able to ensure that you have enough time to collect your data, because the data collection, and I'll get to data collection takes a lot of time, but you want to ensure that you're planning adequately and you have enough time to collect your data, enough time to analyze your data, enough time to revalidate your data, enough time to engage your stakeholders. You don't want to rush. You don't want to rush through it. So planning and establishing a clear, timeline as to how often or when you would start your reporting process and when you want your reports to be ready. It's imperative, and it helps with the entire process. Now, a second point is understanding what is important. Now, when you look at ESG, it's a broad, or when you look at ESG factors can be very broad. We saw Bolanle's the first slide that Bolanle presented that highlighted some ESG factors. We saw so many, the amount of factors she mentioned, but that is not even exhaustive. You have a lot more than that. So if you say you want to report on every single thing, it's not possible. You're not able to report on every single thing. It's going to be difficult. There's room for error. It's going to take so much time. It's going to take more resources. And even in terms of reading, a lot of people don't have the time to sit and read something that is too bulky or something that is not, concise. So the key thing is you want to understand what is the most important thing what are the most important ESG factors that you want to report on. And what helps you or what guides you in identifying those factors is seeing what is relevant to your business, or which of the factors have the most impact on your business, and then which of these factors are most relevant to your key stakeholders. And a good way of identifying this is, conducting a materiality assessment. So it's basically knowing what issues are material, what issues are the most, what ESG issues are the most important, to your business and to your stakeholders. This way you're able to condense, or will I say streamline, those metrics, or, what the factors that you want to report on, as opposed to reporting on any and everything that falls, under the environmental, social and governance bucket. And conducting this materiality it's nothing too difficult. It's a very straightforward thing. You can do it through interviews with your key stakeholders, identifying a list of the ESG factors that are relevant to your business, and then hearing from them as well which of these factors they could rank it for you. They could also provide other factors that you might not even be aware of that are relevant to your business, or that they are interested in in your business. So you can engage these stakeholders, whether it's through interviews, whether it's through surveys or questionnaires. But then you speak to your stakeholders, your internal stakeholders within your organization, because they are very important, as well as the key external, stakeholders. Have those conversations and be able to identify what are the material issues. And then this would help you in streamlining, what you should be reporting on. Now, a key thing after identifying, what you want to report on, or the key factors you should report on, is, adopting a standard framework. Now, this is not a must, and this would differ based on the maturity, the ESG maturity of your business, because, for a small business, you might not need to adopt. For a small business of, let's say, 20 or 30 people, for example, you might not need to adopt a standard framework, right? But then again, ESG is not I wouldn't say it's a one size fits all. It's about using the basic concepts using the basic concept to identify what works for your business and then building on that. But then the good thing you can do is adopt a standard framework, because what it does is it provides some guidance, on what you should report on. There are some frameworks, and there are quite a number of frameworks out there. So you have them GRI, SASB, TCFD, and all the others. So basically identifying what framework works best for the type of your business. Now, there are some frameworks that are better suited, to specific industries, right? Because they are tailored to address sector-specific risks and opportunities. So, for example, when you look at SASB, you'd notice that a lot of maybe manufacturing, or energy businesses, or organizations within, the manufacturing or energy space, adopt or report in line with SASB, because it focuses on the unique ESG factors that affect financial performance in those sectors. You would see organizations that are more heavier on the sustainability, environmental and social impact, might want to adopt the GRI standard because it is robust. So, for example, with the NSI, when we were doing our sustainability reporting, we did adopt the GRI standards because, for us, first of all, we invest across, different sectors. Secondly, while it's important to deliver, commercial returns, the environmental and social aspects of our investment is also very key. And it's important for us as well to highlight the impact, of those investments. And that was why, we chose that. For organizations, for example, that are in, say, the real estate space, they might want to adopt TCFD because their assets are exposed to climate transition and physical risk, right? So they might want to disclose, how they integrate, those considerations in financial planning and risk management. So it differs across board, to be honest. But then selecting what works for you, or understanding your business and adopting that framework that works for your business as well, and also taking into cognizance the ESG maturity of your business. Now, for a business, like I mentioned earlier, for a business that is not mature yet, you could start easy. You could start with just, basic things like, what do I want? What are the basic metrics I can report on? Okay, maybe diversity in the workforce. What percentage of my workforce, are women? Maybe metrics around health and safety. How many accidents, on-site or off-site accidents do I have? Simple things around electricity usage, for example, because we know we all use electricity. So if you're a smaller business, you could start small, right? And by reporting on those factors that those E&S factors, environmental and social factors that are relevant, to your business. And if you're a more mature, organization or a bigger organization, you might choose to, adopt any of the relevant ESG frameworks. Now, you've done your planning, you've done your materiality assessment, and you've identified the factors that you want to report on and all of that. You've selected the framework that you want to align with or use or to guide you in preparing your reports. Then you move on to your data collection and analysis. Now, this is where I would say a lot of the work is, because you don't have all the data within your organization. Even if you oversee, sustainability or you don't have all the organizations. So you definitely all the data, sorry. So you definitely need input from people within your organization. And in some instances, you need information from people outside your organization as well. So for example, an investment, organization such as the NSI might want input from your portfolio companies as well. And these portfolio companies are outside your organization. Within the organization, you want input, you're going to get input from your admin team, you're going to get input from your HR team, input from your procurement team, from your internal audit. Like, everyone is going to feed into, everyone is going to provide the data that is going to feed into your reporting. So that data collection is actually, I'll say, where a lot of the work is, especially if you're an organization that you're not already collecting data on that. So it's important that, first of all, being that you've already identified the factors that you're going to report on, and you've already selected a framework that you're going to align with, you use that to just design a simple data collection template. Now, if you just tell people, if you just give them a bulky list of things, or data that you need, that would lengthen your time. So you want to simplify the template as much as possible so that, whatever unit, is providing that data is also easy for them to understand and identify where that data source is. So put together a simple data collection template for the units, highlighting the data points that you require. This is in a case where you're not already gathering data on this. It's important to identify, the roles and responsibilities clearly in this data gathering process. Who is providing what? Who is doing what? It's clear, because if you just send things out and there are no clear responsibilities, then again, it's going to lengthen your process and it's going to make it more difficult for you. Work with your stakeholders, so whether it's across the unit or if you're collecting data from your portfolio companies as well, you have to work with your stakeholders in identifying some of those, or rather in identifying in getting some of that data, because you might put in a data source that you require, or a metric that you require, and they might not really understand it, or they might have issues, actually getting that, and an example, for me, when we're working on our sustainability report, was things around, electricity usage. We know how, in Nigeria, or over the past couple of months, or since the beginning of the year, the whole thing around, you band A increase in tariffs and all of that. And then, you're buying electricity, and then you're trying to extract, okay, what amount of electricity have you spent based on, what you've paid for it. However, the tariffs, across the different periods differ, right? So you're wondering, okay, from this period to this period, it was this amount, this naira per kilowatt hour, from this to this. So all of that, for example, I know for us, it was something that we had to, work closely with the team, our admin team that is in charge of, overseeing things around electricity and day-to-day, office administration. So at times you have to work, not just sending the templates and expecting people to come back to you. You have to, follow up with them and work with them in analyzing some of that data to get, the key things that you need. And then obviously, once you gather in all your data, you analyze it, and then using your chosen framework, you then start, drafting your report. Now, data validation is important. You don't just want to get data, use it, put in the report, and release it. You also want to go back to your stakeholders once you've let's say, drafted your narrative. You want to go back to your stakeholder, and then just have them confirm that what you're presenting is actually accurate. You don't just want to take in the data, analyze, and go forward with it. So that data validation process from the data process owner is quite important. And then once you've released your report, again, it's not just about releasing it and, okay, I'm done until next year, until the next reporting cycle. You want to review that entire process. How did it go? What could you have done better? You want to look at that report. What is the the reception by your stakeholders? What is their feedback? You speak to them and find out, have you read the reports? What was their input on this? I think this was something that was quite important for us, because while we have been releasing impact reports in prior years, this year was the first time we released like a sustainability report. So engaging with our stakeholders to get that feedback, for us, that was really important. And you also want to benchmark against, your peers. This other company that operates that is similar to mine and operates within, a similar sector. Okay, let me see what their report looks like. Let me look at mine against theirs. Okay, what can I improve? Okay, they did this. Does this apply to me? Just that constant, review process is important, because again, the space is evolving. So things are changing, and, it's important to stay relevant. It's important to constantly review. So at the end of your process, you always want to do that review, identify areas for improvement, so that your next reporting cycle, is going to be much easier, and you're going to improve on some of those gaps that you might have identified. Now, for some organizations, bigger organizations might engage consultants, to help with this process. We had a consultant that helped us with this process. But it's very important, again, that you know what you're doing, because at the end of the day, the consultant supports you, but the consultant doesn't know your business better than you do. So it's not a case where you engage a consultant and you fold your arms and you get your report and then you just, publish it. You work together with them. They provide guidance in their areas of expertise. You provide guidance from the perspective of you knowing your business better than they do, and you work together to draft a report that tells your story, in a way that is actually reflective, of your business and what you're actually doing within the space. Again, like I said, it's based on the maturity of your business. If you're a smaller business, you might not get a consultant from the get-go. You could start this by yourself and just identify the simple things that you could start reporting on, and then, grow along the line. It's a journey. ESG and sustainability is a journey, whether integration, whether reporting, it is a journey, and it's just, starting from where you are and then evolving, as you grow in line with key trends within the space. So what are the key success factors, in ensuring that you're able to report on your ESG efforts? A key thing, first of all, is having a clear ESG strategy. So you can't just wake up and say, okay, I'm going to prepare an ESG report or a sustainability report without even having an ESG strategy in place, right? So you have to, before reporting, you have to actually have a plan to incorporate, ESG in your business. Because I mean, if you don't have an ESG strategy in place, then what are you reporting? So I think that is even the starting point of all of this. And in developing that strategy, a key thing you want to do is develop a strategy that works for your business. You don't just want to go online and see what X person is doing and copy and paste. Yes, it could give you ideas to see what, your peers within similar industries are doing, but they're not a matter of copy and paste. It's just for inspiration, or to also help your thinking as to, okay, what should you be doing? What should your ESG strategy be? So that is a key thing. Before you can even report on anything, it has to be something that you're integrating into your business. So when you look at the business, you look at your business, you look at what your peers are doing, you think of, okay, why do you even want to integrate ESG in your business? I spoke about some benefits earlier on, and Bonali also touched on. So what is your key thing? Do you want to do this because you want long-term value creation? Do you want to do this because you want to enhance your risk management? And to be honest, it's not one or the other, to be honest. I think once you do it, it kind of, has that ripple effect of delivering these other benefits. But for you, knowing your business, knowing your mandate, why do you want to do it? That helps in crafting it. And then identifying what the key processes of your business is. If you're a manufacturing company, for example, your ESG strategy is going to be, and your approach to incorporating ESG is going to be completely different from my organization, for example, that is an investment firm. So identifying what your key processes are, and then identifying where you can incorporate sustainability within, those key processes. So that is even, a key starting point in order to be able to, report easily and report, accurately on your ESG efforts. The second imperative is organizational support. So this is support from your leadership. You have to have leadership buy-in. As I guess we all know, and we've all experienced this. Once you have leadership buy-in, you're able to drive things easier within the organization, as opposed to when you don't have leadership buy-in. And now leadership buy-in is not just enough. You need buy-in from, the different units or departments within your team. Because like I said, you might be the person that is responsible for putting that report together, but you're not the one providing all the data, all the input. You need that cross-departmental collaboration. So you want that organizational support. And in the case where you're an investment institution, you also want that support from, your portfolio companies, to working with your portfolio companies, because some of the data that you need would be from those portfolio companies. So that is another key imperative. Data integrity, Bonali touched on this. It's very, very important that you're gathering and reporting data that is accurate. So you want to, working with the relevant framework that you've chosen, you want to also work with your teams in identifying metrics. Because I gave an example of how we had to work with one of our teams in, extracting, some of the data around our electricity usage and all of that. So you want to work with your teams in, gathering, analyzing, and, validating this data, because the risk of just, gathering data and just pushing it out there, again, like I mentioned earlier on, is the risk of brainwashing, because you may overemphasize your ESG efforts, and it's not a good thing. It's actually can bring greenwashing causes reputational damage, as we've seen with quite a number of, big organizations that have, for example, thrown out statements about decarbonization targets when they haven't even conducted carbon footprint assessments, and all of that. So that's data. Ensuring that you have measures in place to validate your data is important. A key thing, or a good thing to have, is to have a standard template. And this standard template, as opposed to waiting until when it's time for your reporting, so say, for example, you report on an annual basis, as opposed to waiting until it's time for that annual report that you start gathering data. A key thing, one important way you can do it is gather the data on a quarterly basis. So every quarter, the different teams providing the data provide you with that data, so that when it's time to put together your report, you probably have the data for all the quarters already, or maybe you already have for 3 quarters and you're just collecting for 1 quarter. And it's easier as opposed to trying to condense everything in the entire year at one time. That gives room for it gives room for errors. You want to ensure you're consistent in your methodology. If you use one particular methodology in your data gathering and analysis in this year, and then you use another one in the next year, it doesn't give room to be able to accurately compare your performance. And that's important, and because that's another key thing, again, with ESG disclosure. It helps you in measuring your performance and the efforts made, And so if you're using different methodologies for different years, then you're not able to compare, because then you'll be comparing apples and oranges as opposed to apples and apples. And then what you could also do is engage, consultants to do third-party assurance. So the same way, consultants come in and do, audits for, financial statements, they could also do audits for, sustainability reports. But what I would say, or the advice I would give is just get your feet wet first, and maybe do it once or twice, and then bring in your consultant to assure it for you. Because like I said, when you're starting at first, you would make mistakes, and so you want to identify those mistakes, correct those mistakes, and then bring in someone that would help you in assuring your data, and in assuring your report in general. Another key area, obviously, in this day and age, we can't talk about key enablers without mentioning technology and automation. So leverage AI, leverage software, leverage all the analytical tools that you have available to help your data collection, to help your data analysis. There are some tools actually that even after collecting your data, they can even spool or draft a basic report for you. And for an organization, for example, that is small and you don't want to spend money on, say, consultants fee or all of that, you want to make it easier, you could leverage those resources where you put in your data on a quarterly basis, or the different teams put in their data on a quarterly basis. Whenever you want a report, you go to your software and it pulls a simple report for you on your ESG data. So leveraging these tools would make your work easier, and it will improve the integrity of your data, because it gives room for it reduces rate of errors and all of that. And then a key thing, like I did mention earlier, is continuous monitoring. You want to stay on top of the new trends. You want to stay on top of the new standards. You want to know what is new within the space. That is very important. Again, this is an evolving space. What was relevant maybe yesterday, or a way things were done yesterday, might not be the same or might not be relevant today. So you want to stay abreast of what are the key trends, particularly within ESG disclosures, and is how relevant is this to your business? How does this improve your reporting? How can you adopt this? Again, it's not one size fits all. You don't just want to copy and paste anything you see. Whatever you see, you have to also assess it within the context of your business before applying it to your business. And at times it might not even be relevant to your business, so it's very important to take a tailored approach, but being guided by these standard frameworks and being guided by these emerging and evolving trends around standards, regulations, and reporting. So yeah, I think this brings us to the end of the presentation. Thank you so much, and I'll be happy to take any questions or comments.
All right, thank you so much, Mrs. Nana, for sharing your knowledge with us. You've highlighted the importance of ESG reporting in managing risk. building trust and creating value. And you also emphasized on key success factors that includes organizational support, data integrity, and leveraging technology for continuous improvements, which also aligns with the presentation or Mrs. Bolanli's points. We do appreciate that. And next, we are going to the question and answer section. So for those of us that have questions, would appreciate if you can make use of the Q&A chat box to send in your question now. And this session will, my colleague Godfrey would take this question and answer session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Shay, and thank you once again, Nana, for that really insightful presentation, and Mrs. Bonali for your presentation. So, Nana, while you were making your presentation, you'd mentioned something about different people in different sectors trying to understand what is most important to them. So we have a question from Godson, and it says, for an investment bank or capital market operator, what do you consider as essential components of an ESG report?
Okay, thank you for that question. I think, again, it depends on yes, you're an investment bank or you operate in the capital market, but then what are the subsectors as well that you operate in? But then if, for example, I'm to use NSIA, which is, we're not an investment bank or an investment institution, was to use, for example, what we shed light on in our reports, on the environmental aspect. So obviously we highlighted economic performance. So generally our financial performance, across board, we highlighted that. And then across, the environmental factors, we highlighted things around, our efforts in reducing our carbon footprint. We highlighted things around, our investments, our climate-focused investments. So like I did mention earlier on, we do have some investments that are focused particularly, within some ESG, to simplify it, ESG assets, right? So highlighting, those investments that, focused on climate and, driving climate resilience, mobilizing climate finance, highlighting those environmental specific factors. On the social angle, we highlighted things around the social impacts of our environment, social impacts of our investment, sorry. So whether it's, the things that we're doing with the different communities, through our investments, or, things around. So for example, we have investments in the healthcare space, we have investments in the agriculture space. So talking about, people that we're treating through our centers, or outgrower schemes that we're carrying out, or farmers that we're supporting. So things that are specific, or I say social factors that are tied to or drawn from our investments. And then on the governance side, talking about our general approach to risk management, things around our internal control processes, things around our governance, around ESG and all of that. And the report is available on our website, so please feel free to take a look at it and see the different things that we did report on. The consultant that worked with us on this report is actually on this call. So, but yes, it's a really good report. You can take a look at it and see the kind of things that we did report on, and perhaps that would give you some inspiration as to what you can report on within your industry. I hope that provides some insight to your question.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Nana. So I think this question is directed to Bolanle. And Olabisi says, as a consultant offering ESG services for the first time, what are the important factors we need to take into consideration?
Okay, thank you. There's I'll answer her question. I think that's his question, but don't forget Paul's question from earlier on. So Olabisi, the first thing I will say is to listen to your clients. So listen to them, understand what they're trying to achieve, and you'll be surprised that a lot of times people know what they want. They just need you to help them craft and articulate what they're trying to achieve. So listen to it. The second thing I'm going to say is that one size does not fit all. And that's why also you need to listen to your client. One size does not fit all. Everyone is at different paths, because one of the things that you also want is that the ESG sustainability journey, it's a journey, and there'll be different maturities over time. So as you are doing and crafting what they require, start where they are, then you build on it, because you want it to be sustainable. You want it something that is nimble, that they can also, it makes sense to them. There's no point in giving them reports that doesn't make sense, it just doesn't make sense in that sense, and also needs to tailor it to them. Then the last one I want to say is also expanding your views. There's a lot of data and information out there. People have gone before us, so there are other jurisdictions that are a lot more advanced, that they've been doing this. I mean, the first sustainability type, I know we're talking about ESG now, but the first sustainability type reporting started back in the 70s. Then in the 90s, it became more important when, with the World Economic Forum and all these G7, G20 countries came together. So all of these things are already available. They are there. The only thing that some regulators and institutions have done, so the likes of the European, ESMA, and all these people have come together, and, the World Bank, as well as the ISB, is just to try and just sort of streamline it and sort of bring together, focus, certain areas. So there are a lot of things and data and information out there that will be useful to see how you can address the needs of the various stakeholders. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Bolanle, for that. I would just go to, I think, the very first question that we had, so I don't miss it out. Thank you for calling my attention to that. I think that's a question that we got from Paul, and he said, is it a mandatory requirement for ESG or sustainability reports to capture executive compensation? If yes, which disclosure standard is applicable?
Do you want me to answer that? I can answer that. Okay, so so it depends on your what type of organization it is. And the reason why I'm saying that is because if, for example, you already report IFRS, so let's talk about reporting generally, you should have been reporting executive compensation under IAS 24 revised. Yeah. Now, on the ESG standards, there is some requirements. So if you look at things like CSRD, even ISB, there's some requirements, the element they sort of say, they talk about accountability. You don't necessarily to explicitly talk about the remuneration of the executives. However, you need to talk about the portion of their remuneration that is linked to your objectives that you're trying to address. So that is what you need to know. So if you are required to report some of this, for example, Nigeria now, we still have until 2028, but the early adopters that would have done, and there's some there's sort of varying ranges from 2026 for some as well. So it depends on what applies to you. So hope that answers your question, because a lot of executives do not like it, but guess what? They're going to ask. Your investors are going to ask. If anybody wants to give you money, they're going to ask. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks for that, Bolanle. I think the next question would be, the next question that we take would be the one from Kunle. And he says, what are the practical steps for professionals transitioning from sustainability enthusiasts to specialists? I think Eden and now, any of you can take that.
I'll say Nana. So the reason I'm saying that is because she's transitioned for what? She went from consulting to doing this. So maybe talk about that.
Okay. Well, for me, I would say, based on my personal experience in terms of how to transition, or rather how I transitioned, obviously that passion was there, and then it was a thing of turning that passion into, will I say, a skill or a competence. So learning, I know it sounds cliche, but to be honest, that constant learning, there is, I think, how you say that you have experts in certain fields. Someone once told me, I met with someone who in my opinion was or is, an ESG or sustainability expert globally. And I was like, oh, you're such an expert. I look up, and the person said something to me. They said in the ESG or sustainability space, there's nothing, or in the climate space in general, there's nothing like an expert, because it's always evolving. So there's absolutely no one that knows everything on everything. So, and one of the advice they gave me was constantly keeping, and that's why I kept making reference to staying abreast, of trends. You want to know what is out there, what is important, because again, it's a field that is quite broad. So where do you want to, what niche do you want to be in? Is it around, climate financing? Is it around climate investments? Is it around policy formulation? Is it around, transactions? So conducting, E and SDD for transactions? Is it around, building capacity to be able to provide, advisory, sustainability and ESG advisory support to clients, just like Bonanli and her team, so it's a broad niche. So first of all, you want to even know which part of this you would play in. For me, I think I would say I do a bit of everything across, these different areas that I have mentioned. But then it would be good to know what is that particular niche that you want to, operate in within the space, because it's quite broad. And then staying abreast of everything, because again, you could be invited, for example, you have a niche in one certain area, but you could be asked to speak on something that is not completely within your area, but within the same field. So having the specialist knowledge, but at the same time having, a general knowledge of everything within that space. Obviously, your certifications and your trainings, you have a number of, reputable organizations that offer trainings, different levels of trainings and capacity, building. So you want to also leverage on that, get the necessary certifications so that there's credence and there's, let's say, it gives you the weight, that you do require. So that as well is quite important. So I'll say, to be honest, I'll say those are the things, or rather that was my personal experience or my personal approach in, making that shift from, my main background to where my previous background to, sustainability and ESG.
Okay, thank you so much. So David Ikechukwu has two questions, one for Bolanle and one for you, Nana. So for Mrs. Bolanle, he says, what would you say are the criteria for a good data governance system? The criteria for a good data governance system. And then for Mrs. Nana, he says, when you talk about the ESG reporting, I just wanted to ask that as much as we report on what we do, how do we report on the impact of our endeavors on the socioeconomic and environmental landscape? So yeah, so there's two questions. So for Bolanle, what would you say are the criteria for a good data governance system? And for Nana, how do we report the impact of your company's efforts on the socioeconomic and environmental landscape?
Okay, so for data governance, there are actually a few frameworks that you can use. One that we tend to use a lot, that you'll find quite common, is the fact that the data must be reliable, must be free from bias. Yeah, so reliable, free from bias, as well as consistent. So those are usually the sort of 3 areas. There's some other ones that you will hear that they will say the PPP, so that process driven. It must be periodic, and then it must be, I can't remember the third P. So there are different types, but the idea is that if data that you're using, so you must be able to tailor it to what you need to use it for. So it has to be reliable. The second thing, in fact, is that it has to be free from bias. So a lot of times the people that produce the data or give you the data, everyone has a bit of bias somehow, because in the sense you don't want to look bad. Nobody wants to look bad and everything, but it has to be free from bias, because if it's not free from bias, how then are you able to bring in improvements, and also enhance it over then. And then the last one is consistent, because it has to be comparable. So there has to be year on year, where you have to be compare what you did last year to this year, and then the last one that also will be useful is also periodic cutoff. So it's very important, actually, to help that comparable. So you are comparing what you did maybe year on year or quarterly to the next quarter, so that you can see how you are developing and maturing in that journey. So that's what I'll say.
Thank you so much, Bolanle. So I think we'll just go to the question for Mrs. Nana. And basically, how do we report the impact of the organization on socioeconomic and environmental landscape?
So I think there are a couple of ways. First of all, there's impacts. You have impact data or impact matrix that you can track directly, right? So, for example, I make an investment, or let's say my organization, for example, we make an investment, within in a certain business, or within a certain sector. While making that investment, right from the beginning, or even working with that, let's say, investee company, or that partner, in identifying, okay, these are the impacts. This is the impact that we're going to track. These are directly tied to the business, right? So say we're launching, or we're making, let's say we're setting up an SPV in an agriculture SPV, for example. So there are things that are going to be clear there, things around job creation. You're able to directly track how many people you're able to employ, from that investment. Things around, so if it's an agriculture investment that is supposed to, let's say, support farmers, for example, you're able to directly track, okay, how much, if it's inputs to farmers, you're able to directly track, how much metric tons of inputs am I giving out? If it's credits to farmers, you're able to measure, okay, how much credit, how much in terms of Naira terms am I giving to farmers? So there's those direct impact that you can directly measure, and it's good to always work with whether it's the relevant team or the relevant partner to tease out what those metrics are. That is because again, you don't want to impose anything on anyone. When you work with people together in carving out what those metrics are, then it's easier for them to track it and to provide it to you. But then there are also other, would I say, indirect impacts that you also have to measure, because yes, you've made this investment, yes, you've supported 10 farmers, but then there's a multiplier effect on some of these investments, and that is where that is the area that might seem a bit more difficult. So for example, impact measurement is also another field on its own, or another bucket on its own, within the sustainability space. There are people that that is their focus, that is their expertise, but a way to do that, or our approach to doing that, our approach to measuring the indirect impacts arising from our investments, is leveraging multipliers and methodologies. When you look out here, you see a number of socioeconomic multipliers by either World Bank or the IMF, or these top DFIs, or multilateral organizations. And there are also methodologies, also things like, for example, you want to extract, you want to know the carbon emissions from your electricity usage. It's difficult to go and maybe put something and measure it, right? But then there are methodologies that you use, maybe based on the amount of money that you're spending, on electricity, you're able to put in those inputs, and then these, multipliers would work around it and, give you an estimate of what, that impact is in terms of your carbon emissions. So yes, you can do directly. It's simple. You can tease those out yourself, or whoever is in charge of, overseeing that work stream, agree them and track them. But then for the indirect ones, you want to leverage, existing methodologies or existing multipliers, but ensure that your data source or the input data is as accurate as possible, because what you're getting is estimated data. So you want that estimate to be largely reflective to what actually, is. Again, you don't want to overstate, the impact of, what you're doing.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nana, and thank you so much, Bolanle, for the responses so far. So we have a follow-up question from Godson, who had asked the question earlier about investment banks, and he says, among the most commonly used frameworks for ESG reporting, which would you recommend for a financial institution, and why?
I mean, I guess Bolanle, I'll provide a short answer, and then Bolanle is the consultant here. So Bolanle would guide us. To be honest, I mean, again, like I said, I'm very mindful of giving recommendations as to what to use for your business. One thing I kept hammering on during my presentation is knowing what is out there and then tailoring it to your business. NSI is a sovereign wealth fund. So there are times where not even just the ESG team, maybe other teams are trying to do other things with other people. And they're like, oh, use this, use that framework, use this framework. And you're the one who knows your business. You're like, no, I'm not for example, there might be a framework that someone will say, oh, use this. I'm like, no, I'm not a commercial bank. This is what I'm doing. Or no, I'm not in this space. So you know your business, better. Now, a consultant can guide you in terms of, okay, you should consider this. These are the most applicable, or, your peers within your industry, these are the ones that they use. But then ultimately, for me, I'm very mindful of, prescribing to people, what frameworks to apply, for their own business. I understand my company in and out, and so I'm able to select the framework that is most effective, for us and conveys, what we want to convey and what we actually do. So I'll hand over to Bolanle.
Absolutely, Nana. So in responding to Godson's question, I'm also going to respond to Daniel Onyango's question on the best simplified model, as well as there was one more person I think I saw on
we have quite a number of questions about frameworks.
Framework. Okay, so the truth about it is that there are so many, but there is the regulatory compliance, and there's the first level basis reporting. So the first thing, before you start doing regulatory compliance, you even need to have base reporting, first of all, where, when you're starting your journey, what you should be doing, what you can guide. Now, as I said, there's a lot, but the truth about it is something like the GRI, which is the Global Reporting Initiative, that one is quite comprehensive, but the truth about it is that everything in it is not applicable to everyone. So you need to spend some time identifying even what your objectives are before you then start deciding all the other things, and then come up with your objective, then your strategy, and then you can start talking about reporting. So GRI is good. And the good thing about the GRI is that the components in it, that they're even starting to look at industry specific reporting as well that can help you. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the one that you should do, because the truth about it is that there's a lot of it that is not really applicable to everyone. So you can look at that. The other thing that you shouldn't ignore is when you come to some of the SDG goals, as we all know, the 17 of them, there might be some things that you also want to incorporate, and you can look at that. That's so first line, baseline target. Now let's talk about compliance. We know that FRC Nigeria has said, please do ISSB. However, and if you're a PI, so if you're regulated by them, because not everybody that's under the umbrella. So if you're regulated by them, you're a PI, you're a PLC, whatever, you have to do ISSB, so you have to do that. But a lot of the things from the GRI will help you to be able to report with that. And also bearing in mind that the IFRS S1 and S2 by the ISSB is also actually it came out of the SASB reporting. So there's actually another sustainability standard that was also out there that's kind of helpful. So that will help you. Now, if you have a subsidiary or a parent company that is European based, UK based, there's a CSRD. If you are somebody that is in a particular industry, there's quite a number of one. Even Nigeria has its own sustainability framework. So there's quite a lot of it. So you need to first, as an organization, understand the ones that are applicable to you. So is it TCFD? Is it SASB? Is it CSRD? Is ISB? It might mean that you have to do everything, but it doesn't mean that you need to have 4 or 5 reports. You can have one comprehensive sustainability report. There's some organizations that have a separate sustainability report, and then they have extracts of it in their financial statement, and they refer people to that report. Some people do that approach. A simple example is someone like a Seplat. That's what Seplat have done. Lafarge have something similar like that. So you have companies that do that as well. So so hopefully that will answer those guys asking about the framework.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. I think we have just the opportunity to take just one more question so that we can go to the final session for today. And we'll take the question from Bernard. So Bernard had 3 questions in one. So the first question was, what revenue assurance, and I think this is directed to Nana, what revenue assurance can you add to your firm through ESG reporting? And how do you assess the materiality? And then the final question is, what department or unit is supposed to maintain this sustainability reporting?
Okay, I'll start with the last question and then work back up. In terms of the departments that should handle sustainability reporting, it depends on how your organization is structured. Now, if you have, a sustainability and ESG team, then obviously the sustainability and ESG team would drive that process. But then remember, I did mention that you have to work across teams because you don't have all the data. And, when applying, these standards, there are certain areas or certain requirements that you need to get, from other teams. Now, in a case where you don't have a standalone sustainability and ESG team, which team within that organization is in charge of driving the ESG strategy or implementing the ESG framework, in case there's no standalone ESG team? There are organizations where, it's embedded within, for example, the risk team. There's some organizations where that function is embedded in the risk team. So if the function is embedded in the risk team is responsible for driving the ESG strategy, then that team should drive, the sustainability reporting process. So whoever is or whichever team has the responsibility of implementing that organization's ESG strategy or ESG framework should be the team that should drive the sustainability or ESG reporting process. Obviously, working closely, with all the other teams and all the other units. So that's the third question. Sorry, the second question. The second question was around materiality, right? How do you assess materiality? So first of all, you want to sit and look at your business and identify what are the key, environmental, social and governance factors that are relevant to your business. So just your business as is, you want to identify those factors. And then you also then want to look within your sector or across, other peers. What are other issues? Because again, you don't want to filter it at the beginning, right? You want it to be exhaustive, but not a balance between it being exhaustive and it being the most relevant issues. But then you highlight those that are relevant to your organization, and then you look within your sector or across your peers, benchmark across your peers and see, okay, what is also relevant in them? And then you have a list at least of what those key ESG factors are. It's also important to look at regulatory requirements. When you look at regulatory requirements that are applicable to you, you're able to, add to that list of the ESG factors that are relevant to your business or have a potential impact on your business. And the next is then engaging your stakeholders. So your internal stakeholders, your management team, the heads of the different units, people within your organization, and then your external stakeholders, the key external stakeholders. So probably your investors, your key customers, your regulators, maybe your suppliers, those key external stakeholders. You want to engage the internal and the external stakeholders. So you present them with these factors, they look at it and, they help in, rating or ranking, these factors, right? Okay, they think this is important, or that is important. And at times, there might even be some factors that you might not have listed, even after, listing what is relevant to your business, and even after, adding additional factors from benchmarking and from, looking at regulatory requirements. So they might also mention to you, okay, these are some factors as well, that are important, that you might not have mentioned. So you have all those factors, you have their feedback on, ranking, okay, which of these are prioritizing these factors, which of them are important, which of them are not, all of that. And then you assess your likelihood versus impact. What is the likelihood of this, and what is the impact of it on my business? You do that. And then based on that, you're able to identify or prioritize the top factors. At times, after even doing all of this process, you might see that there might be some areas that are not even relevant to your business. I know with us, there were a number of factors that we ended up even taking out of the assessment because they were not, relevant at all. Our stakeholders were not really interested in terms of impact on the business, not really. So having that approach, starting with the bucket and then assessing it through different lenses would help you in tailoring and identifying what those key issues are. I think that's the second question. And then please remind me of the first question.
So the first question was more about financial assurances that you can get for your company through ESG reporting.
Oh, okay. So I mean, there are a lot of, let's say ESG, there are a lot of financial opportunities. I did mention earlier on, for example, being able to access capital, that is, it's almost impossible, to be honest, this day and age, to be able to access, capital or investments, without ESG reporting. So you have a number of ESG linked, revenue opportunities. So even things around, for example, carbon credits, right? It's also linked, is an ESG linked, revenue opportunity, things around your climate financing. So whether it's your green bond issuance, your sustainability bond issuance, so these days you see a lot of, sustainable product lines and, a lot of, revenue opportunities or capital opportunities that are tied to, your ESG disclosures. So I think it's very important for us to be able to tap from those, because a lot of those are focused on Africa, and developing countries, but then they're just sitting there, and it's difficult, for a lot of organizations to tap into that just because of, one or two things, of which ESG disclosures is at the top of that list. So I think it's important for us to leverage, not just integrating ESG within our businesses, but then, being open about, our efforts and our approach in order to be able to tap into, these funds, and in order to be able to add these additional revenue, streams to our businesses.
Can I just add one thing to what Nana said on that revenue assurance? It's important that people see that the ESG practices and the operations actually gives you an opportunity to create synergies that would help with revenue assurance. So things around the compliance part of things, the fact that you tighten your belt, you're more aware, you build in certain processes around stakeholder management, and then you're more aware of what's going on in your organization to reduce waste and some other things that you need. And from doing that, that would help you with your revenue assurance if done properly. Just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bolanle. Thank you once again, Nana. I think that's as many questions as we can take for now. But we'll still have another Q&A session after the next presentation. Just wanted to say thank you so much to our two speakers so far. We can all agree that they've really given us a lot of meaningful and very useful insights for when it comes to ESG reporting. So we're just going to quickly move to risk management in ESG. And to handle that is going to be Omobolanle Adekoya, who had spoken to us earlier. So she's going to take us on a number of case studies, a number of things that we should really, take note of when it comes to ESG. But just before Omobolanle comes back on, can we just, I don't see any round of applause for the work that the speakers have done so far with the questions and the presentations. Okay, I think I'm just going to do that.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
So you have the
Thank you.
floor, Omobolanle. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Yes. No, thank you. And thank you for being very engaging. Thank you for your questions. It's been really good. So I'm going to be talking about risk management in ESG and identifying and mitigating risk. And then we'll talk about a few case studies. Now, because of how broad ESG is and what it encompasses, including how we also deal with things around vendor management, supply chain issues, all sorts of things, it doesn't come without its risk. And there are quite a lot of risks that can come with it, which can be good, where some of those risks can pay off to help with improving shareholder value. However, there are also the negative side of the risk where, if not done properly, it can expose you to certain things. So in this session, I don't have an exhaustive list, but I will talk about some of the risks that we need to be aware of when we're doing this. And that is why it's important when we're reporting, when we're looking at our data and just our internal processes, that we are aware of this. And that's one of the reasons why when Nana was talking about the fact that if you don't have a dedicated sustainability team, the risk team is actually quite a good department to warehouse your ESG responsibilities. So what I've done is I've just come up with some risk. Let's looking at the various areas of ESG. And here are some of the risks that can happen as a result of your business activities. So on the environmental risk, what are the risks related to an organization's impact on the natural environment and climate? One very, very common one, which we don't always think about, is around water. What does it mean? Water. So your water usage, how your water usage is affecting those in the area where maybe you are manufacturing, or even to your products. The fact that you're depleting the resources in that area. Where does your water come from? How sustainable is it? How you're refining or using water? Water is a big one, and it is not just your direct water usage. What about your suppliers? The other thing is that your suppliers may also not be local. So what are they doing outside? So let's give an example. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about what's happening in places like, I think it's Burkina Faso. Places like Burkina Faso and some other places where they want to start. There's a massive drought in some places as a result of water shortages, and they want to start killing elephants. And I'm sure some of you would have seen it in the newspaper and on the news, the amount of controversy. Even me as an African, I kept thinking to myself that, why is Kenya, so I know, Kenya is the one that wants to kill elephants, but I'm like, how? What's going on? Elephants are one of the most what's it called? They're not extinct, but they're endangered species. But this is happening. And guess what? A lot of it stems from water, and people don't necessarily think about it. Another one is around air pollution. Air pollution is a very big one. So the fact is that to produce a lot of the things that we're doing, we're actually using coal, we're using fossil fuels. A lot of these things are emitting into the atmosphere. How does that impact? This environmental impact is there. Excessive greenhouse gas emissions, whether it's from your electricity usage, whether it's even your trucks, so not just for production, but your distribution channel. Distribution channel also does that. So whether you are in financial services, for those financial services, things as simple as even your ATMs, financial services organizations, you have ATMs that are being powered. What does that mean in that environment as well? So people don't always look at this. And that's why one of the key things when we are looking at your materiality assessment, it's important to get, have a stakeholder awareness session. During the stakeholder awareness, we will talk about these things to be able to highlight it. Depletion of natural resources, so trees, things. Do things that people don't even realize when people cut down trees to make pencils? Do you know that? And there are ripple effects. So if you cut down a tree, for example, to make furniture or to make pencils, that tree is not able to put oxygen in the environment. That oxygen is not able to combat the excess greenhouse gases that are in there in that sense. So there's a lot of things that sort of go. So how do you then replace? So as you're depleting, are you able to replace? So a lot of it is cyclical. So you need to actually look at it end to end. And that's why it's important to look at some of this risk. Biodiversity losses also comes in this area as well. People don't always sort of say, so if you're digging, so for example, cement, a lot of people, you're mining, people are mining cement, the limestone that comes with it. We see all those massive repositories and deposits, but then it actually creates biodiversity loss in those areas. So whether it's Abeokuta, I'm sure some of you who are, you're based in the Southwest, you will see those piles, but then there's a lot of biodiversity loss in that area affecting the roads, causing erosion on the roads, and they're causing bad roads. But guess what? Who is paying for the loss? Everybody is complaining that the government in that area are not fixing the road. But guess what? We're not identifying the fact that the organizations in that area that are doing those things are actually the ones causing it, but everyone is looking to the government. So who is responsible for looking at that? In addition, some of these things are causing severe weather events and natural disasters and that we're not aware of. And I'm sure, I don't know, if everyone has been following this series. I remember maybe 2 series ago, we talked about the fact that climate, the Earth is 1.5 degrees temperature higher than it was about 10, 15 years ago. So we're having a lot of severe weather events where the seasons are morphing into one. We're having situations where there's excess rain, monsoon. There's a lot of things sort of going on. So as an organization, you have to be aware of your impact on the environment. These risks are there because if you get caught as well, it's better you prepare, because if you get caught and people blame you, it can cause serious reputational risk, which in a sense will affect your returns, your shareholder value, because get a whistleblowing. So I'll give an example. Boeing is one where they had a disgruntled employee. I'm sure you also know about the crashes that happened. So their Max 737, there was the accidents that happened, the crashes, unfortunately, that happened. But then guess what? They now upset an employee who then exposed them, the fact that they knew that there were issues around the training of these particular aircrafts. And they get fined, seriously fined. And now they're going through so many court issues. So all of these things, they can also intertwine. So for example, let's talk about social risk, like the Boeing example I gave you. The Boeing example, they had issues with the equipment, which is the issue. But guess what? They got into trouble because of a social risk in that sense. So let's talk about social risk. Social risks, looking at your local communities, looking at poor labor practices, and remember that it is not just you, not just your direct impact. What about the impact of your vendors? You need to look at it. What about the impact of your supply chain? You need to look at it. No longer can you ignore what other people are doing. Even your clothes, wear your clothes. Who are you buying clothes from? Who are you buying drinks from? These things all have ripple effect in that sense. Human rights valuation, inadequate community engagement. I'm sure all of us are not, it wasn't long ago, the issues that Shell faced back then with the Ogoni people. I'm sure we are all aware about those things that happened back then, with cancer. I think it's cancer. I can't remember now. Apologies, my Nigerian history not so good, but all these things are there. Product safety issues, the cost, because some of these things have significant costs. So if you remember when they recall airbag issues that Toyota had, where their airbags, they had to now replace, and even Nigeria. So they're manufacturing the Toyota somewhere else, whether it's in what's it called, Dubai, they have a Middle East assembly plant. They also have one in the UK. They have all these different, they have one in China and all these places. But guess what? Even you, that is Nigeria, they had to recall one of my cars to do a product replay. So product safety issues. So things around safety, we need to check those things. Things around data protection and privacy errors. I talked about this earlier on, that as we do the social and also do diversity and inclusion. So one of the aspects of social on the ESG is about our what they call the DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, or equality, so diversity, equity, or equality initiatives, how we want to be more inclusive. We also need to bear in mind data protection and privacy issues, because if we get it wrong, these things can cost us money in the long run. So are you incorporating even your human capital department in some of these areas? Are they aware of the risks that can come with when we get these things wrong? It's so important. Governance risk is another area. So governance risk is focused on our internal business practices. So things looking at your governance structure, looking at how you compensate, so the transparency around performance, financial performance, things around even cutoff. Cutoff when you're doing your financial performance for your periodic reporting. So whether it's your financial statement, how are you doing some of these things? Corruption and bribery. So to be able to do business, are you paying somebody to give you favor? So even at the ports of authority, if you're bringing in goods, what type of corruption and bribery is going on? Fraud that may be going on in the system. Conflicts of interest, how are you dealing with that? Inflated executive or key management compensation. We have heard about organizations around the world where 1 year you have the organization declared big profits, the executives got big bonuses, they were able to pay themselves dividends. They had big bonuses, they were able to pay themselves dividends. And then next year, they now say that, oh, we're firing or we're letting go of 3,000 people. That is a big governance stroke social risk. So people will be like, but last year, so what happened between the year before? Is it true? What's going on? Is there fraud going on here? So the optics of it looks very bad, where the executives are just there and not thinking about what happens if they let go of those 3,000 people and all the people attached to them. Their families are affected, their environments are affected. So there's a lot of things. So even though I've talked about these risks under environmental risk, social risk, governance risk. Some of them overlap each other. So one can have can lead to another type of risk under another pillar, can lead to another type of risk on another pillar. So these are the things that we need to keep assessing and asking as organizations so that we can mitigate this risk and we're prepared. If anything goes wrong, you can also justify your actions or you can address some of those issues. Because let me tell you something, once the reputation of the brand is affected, it costs you a lot more to get back goodwill. You do not want to lose goodwill. And that is why you have to identify this risk and address them. The other thing that happens when you're going through your ESG strategy, when you're going through your various ESG strategy, and so a lot of times we identify the objectives and then we also identify the risks that we're trying to address. And then, of course, within that, you now look at material risk as well. So some of these things are centered around that. So things around your tax compliance is a risk, making sure that you don't fall foul of tax compliance. So legal compliance is a risk. Make sure you don't fall foul. So all of these things are there. So even though you have the baseline things that may seem general, there are specific risks in there, which will also help you devise your ESG processes that would address this risk that you're trying to cover. So here are some examples of industry-specific ESG risks that we know about and we've seen. I've sort of touched on some of them. So let's look at your industry. So for example, financial services, your regulatory requirements can result, compliance violation. So for example, if you're in financial services, you need to think about whether it's CBN, whether it's SEC, whether it's NGX, whether it's FRC, but it doesn't stop there. Remember that even in financial services, you are giving money, you are loaning money to certain organizations. There are certain organizations that bank with you. If they themselves are falling foul, you can also get caught up in it because you need to make sure that you're also doing responsible finance. Where are you investing that money in that sense? You have to pay attention to this because it can happen in a situation where, so I'll give you a very simple example. Let's say you're an investment bank and you have invested in a clothes manufacturing company. From your point of view, you have just invested in a clothes manufacturing company. However, that investment structure, maybe you have a syndicate group that you have come together to invest in this clothes manufacturing company. But this clothes manufacturing company actually has its base manufacturer in maybe India or somewhere in Africa or Ethiopia or Sudan or somewhere along those lines because of natural resources, or Haiti. And then all of a sudden, that organization now has what's called human trafficking violations, or they have human labor, modern day slavery violation. And all of a sudden, people look at it and go, oh, they were giving money by this ABC financial services institution. That is a big, big reputational damage to you. So do not just look at it in silo, thinking that you're just worried about it. You also have to look at this. And that's why now institutions, when they are giving money, they have a checklist of sort of checking all these things and getting these organizations to make representations that they will not practice some of these illegal acts or unethical acts. So you have to be conscious about the projects that you invest in. I've already talked about climate risk exposures, even from investments for carbon intensive industries like oil and gas as well. You need to look at that. And even your own activities. I talked already about your offices, your branches, your ATM machines. You have to be very, very, mindful of this. Then there's another side of it where I know that in our organization, in our country, risk appetite may be low. So some financial services organizations, I know one in particular that is a local bank that will not invest in agri, for example, because they think it's very high risk. But guess what? agri is a very, very important part. So you might have a situation where you're being forced to do it, but you don't want to do it. But you want to make sure that on the social side, that you're also showing equality. So it's things that we need to think about and broaden our minds when we're looking at industry-specific ESG risks. Then moving on to the energy industry. In the energy industry, I will also talk about mining. Mining is a big one because we're starting to increase our mining activities in Nigeria as well. So what are these high GHG emissions? Some of you would have heard about the fact that there's scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. So looking at the scope 3 emissions, which is a lot more extensive, which doesn't just focus on our supply chain, but it also looks at the other layer outside of that and how they can also have environmental degradation. So one of the things that you'll find and you'll see in the financial statements of a lot of all these energy and mining companies is this thing called decommissioning liabilities. How can you restore, so people put in their financials what it will cost them to restore where they have been mining, where they have been operating back to its original state. But honestly, let us be factual. Can they really restore it to the state? Because if extractive industry, you've extracted from it. So what are the other things you can do to compensate for it? So you need to think about it, which is where the negative impacts on the local communities comes from. Looking at things around displaced people, looking at health issues. How can you ensure that the people in your environment, in that environment that you're operating in, their health issues are being addressed? Their children are going to school. There is clean water in that place. The roads are good. Unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have a lot of accountability. People are not being held accountable, but it is going to change. And we need to wake up about this. In the midst of this as well, we need to also look at the circular economy. So circular economy looks at with things like recycling. How can you make sure that when some of the byproducts, if they're still useful, how can we integrate it back in the environment so that it's being useful, it's being recirculated and recycled, and we're minimizing and reducing waste. Some of those things that we need to do. Things around the financial and operational risks due to transition to renewable energy. So how do you deal with abandoned assets? So at the moment, you have certain organizations that are now moving to CDGs or CPG around the gas, the use of gas. What is going on around that? What are you going to do about abandoned assets and repurposing it? What about the people that are losing their jobs as a result of what you are doing? Are you then looking and assessing how can you integrate and incorporate them in other areas? Are you upskilling people? These are things that we need to think about. Are you upskilling people in that sense around this ESG risk? So you need to think about some people, even with the advent of AI and the uses as well. How are you repurposing people, repurposing resources into other areas while minimizing the financial and operating risks to you as well? So these things are very important. Manufacturing and retail is one of the highest consumption. They have the highest consumption of a lot of things. However, there's a lot of waste that is going on. So, for example, in other climes, you find that closed companies, people have a lot of clothes that they're not using anymore. They leave them in landfill. They don't always recycle them. They don't, but in other places, people are using it as an opportunity to make money. So, for example, vintage clothes is becoming a big and upcoming, industry where people are able to repurpose clothes, make use of recyclable cotton, all these things, whilst trying to minimize the depletion to the environment. And these are things that we need to look at and make it easier in our environment. So it's not just about welfare. A lot of people do it just for welfare, but let's look beyond that. What else can you do? I'll give a very good example. In agriculture, things like coconuts and pineapple. Do you know that coconut and pineapple are one of the only crops where every single part of them is useful? Are you aware of this? And you will find that countries like Thailand have discovered this, and this is what is happening. So, for example, coconut, the hairs from coconut can be used to make bags. It can be used to make roofs. It can be used to make furniture. In that sense, you have the inner, the food for consumption, the liquid for consumption. So it doesn't waste at all. Same thing with pineapple. Pineapple has certain enzymes from the skin that can be used to make drugs. Then of course, you have the fruits and the drinks and everything that comes with it. The spikes on the tops can be replanted so that more pineapple is grown and become pineapple suckers. So there's a lot of things that we do. So even though the initial investment can be quite a lot when we first do this thing. A lot of people complain about the initial investment of these things. However, we need to think long term. That is why if you're on an ESG journey, you have to think long term. It's not just about short-term profits and gain. It might take you time to discover. It might require you to invest and sort of do innovation in that sense to be able to do this. Do you understand? Do you even know that even, going back to things around the pineapple, the biotin that comes from some of the leaf can be used for certain drugs to help save people's life, people that have had cancer sufferers, in that sense, to help them replenish their hair and different things that can happen. But guess what? Why does it have to just be people abroad? Why can't we do that locally in Nigeria? Why can't we use the opportunity? Why can't we partner? So the other thing that ESG also brings up about is the ability to be able to partner with other people. So there might be something that you need or you have that you can give to someone in exchange for something else. This will really help us to help in the long run to reduce our input costs, because we're able to make certain investments so that we can increase shareholder value. So we need to think about this and think our why as well, and also invest in innovation to see how we can use different areas. Of course, if you get it wrong with pollution, waste, regulatory penalties will come. There'll be public health issues. At the moment, we're still getting away with it, but I can tell you that a lot of the government agencies around it, people are now starting to look at this thing, and over time, things will change, and we need to be prepared for it. Worker health, safety risks, the fact that your employees can maybe sue you for certain things, because it's happening. I'll give an example. Masts, the telco masts. The telco masts currently in Nigeria, we're not suing our telco companies for some of the masts that they put near to homes and everything. But in other countries, they're being sued at the moment because people are seeing the correlation of healthcare risks and having this mast because of the thing. But guess what? There's also innovation that can help reduce some of the impact if the telco companies would just invest in it. I know some of them are looking at it, but these are things that we all need to prepare for the long term. So I thought it was important to share this slide because a lot of organizations may not be aware that it's there. So what happens is that there are some organizations that do ratings for companies, not just in Nigeria, but they do it around the world. So there are people like risk analytics. There are a few of them that sort of do ESG scores for companies, and for based on set criteria, industry set criteria. Now in Nigeria, these are our these are companies that have already done their ESG practices and also have self-disclosed. They have decided to be part of this rating. Now, the reason why this is very good is because when investors, especially foreign investors, are coming to look at this, they look at your ESG scores around the different risks. So whether it's the environmental side, the governance side, or the social side, and it can determine even as much as 2 to 3% of the your pricing around the investment or the money, the financing that they give you when it comes to interest rates. Yeah. And look at this now. So we have Dangote, who's at 73%, which is quite high. Of course, all of us also have to be careful not to do any greenwashing and everything, because a lot of these things are self-disclosure. So people self-disclose, and then your financial statement also has a lot of information in there that they use to be able to rate you. Now, look at this now. You have Access, who's financial services. You have AXA, who's financial services. Then you have people like Dangote, cement. You've got pharmaceutical here. You've got PZ Cousin, who's a big manufacturer of food products. So there's a lot that can happen. So, and there are other organizations here. So given where you are in your walk, in your ESG journey, this is where you need to attain to, making sure that your ESG scores and your, are sort of in line with industry practice. And I don't know, as I said, it's still quite new, but this thing has been here now going on 4 to 5 years, and there's more. There's more to come. More and more companies, even MTN also has a score on here. They didn't make this score, but they are also there, and a few other organizations that have done it. So let's take it seriously. And as I said, it is what a lot of investors will start looking at going forward. So for the last sessions, I just thought to sort of put and highlight case studies of ESG risk management, some of the things that have happened, and so that you can also see that these things, they've been happening from time eternal. They're not just recent things. I'm sure a lot of you would have heard about what happened with British Petroleum when they had the oil spill. The oil spill back in 2010 was horrible. It killed a lot of wildlife. So apart from the fact that the explosion happened and what happened to the oil spill in the water, it killed people, it killed wildlife because some of it flowed into the water. So that also affected the fishing industry, fisheries. So it affected food supply chain. It affected tourism. So you can see that it was such a broad impact. So yes, one organization had a disaster on an oil rig, but it went beyond. It affected transportation, tourism, fishing, so many things. The cleanup cost alone. So apart from the fact that they were fined 65 billion in fines, their share price dropped significantly. They lost a lot of people, shareholders. The cleanup costs were astronomical. The compensation claims. Do you know, are you aware that it was only in 2018 that the last compensation claims that came through? So even though this thing happened in 2010, British Petroleum have been paying every year because something else comes on, one effect or the other, post-traumatic stress disorder and everything. And it's, and it's been the biggest in history. So it's important that you managing your ESG risk is so key so that you don't find yourself in this situation, because things can come year on year. Guess what? Even last year, if you check in the newspaper, last year, there was another claim that was brought to them on British Petroleum. You can Google it, that came to them. So this is another, how many? That's 13 years later, they still got. Their reputation damage was very high. They had to let go of some stuff. They had to restructure the business, a lot of things. And of course, increased regulatory scrutiny down in Aberdeen where they have their rigs. So a lot of things happened down there as well. So you can see how this is very important with regards to energy, oil and gas. And as I mentioned earlier on, we are all aware about what happened with Shell. Can you just imagine if the stuff that happened locally with Shell happened in another jurisdiction? I can assure you that this is the type of thing that will probably have happened. They've expanded more. But the world is changing. Expectations are changing. And that's why accountability and trust are one of the two key things as we're doing this, our ESG journey is very important. So another one is around in the manufacturing industry, Volkswagen. So let me tell you what happened. Volkswagen came out and said that their diesel engine, as we all know, diesel, of course, gives out more emissions than PMS. They came out to say that, their vehicles were clean energy, and what they did actually was that they installed a software in millions of their diesel vehicles to manipulate how the emissions tests were being done. So they got round regulators so that it appears that their cars were environmentally friendly. And they got away with it for such a long time. They made a lot of sales. So they had false sales as a result of it. But then guess what happened? They had a new MD coming, and he had a different philosophy. They had a new MD coming. He had a different philosophy. One of those people that, he was quite a German man, a lot more principled. And they also lost 2 employees. There were 2 employees that left, who then confessed to what they did. And the scandal broke. It was such a horrible thing. They lost a lot of people. I think one of them even committed suicide. There were things that happened. It was such a negative in the environment, where eventually they shut down the plant. People in that community lost their livelihood. A lot of things happened. It resulted in fines. Then they had to settle people, because a lot of people fined them. The vehicle, they had to repurchase the vehicles from owners. In that sense, they had significant reputation damage, reduction in sales. However, even though all of these things happen, do we know that today Volkswagen actually have the highest sales when it comes to electric and hybrid car sales as of today? And that's because even though this has happened, this is a good example of how you can turn around your mismanagement or your misfortune or your, the issues that you've done to increase the sale. Because that MD that came in, when he found out what had happened, he came clean, somewhat of integrity. He came clean. He said, look, you know what? We need to rebuild your trust, and we will do it. And he came clean, and they started working on innovation to rebuild trust. They rebuilt trust, and they were able to come up with new cars. They came out with their electric vehicles, their hybrid vehicles, and today they are doing amazingly well with the number of, so Volkswagen now have a wide variety, and they are now making big money. And all these things people still remember, but they have now turned it around. So this is a good case of them turning things around. The other one I want to talk about is around Wells Fargo. We are aware about what happened. They were overly aggressive with some of the things that we're doing. So theirs was more focused on the social aspects of things, unethical sales practices, which they then eventually got caught on. And a lot of this happened as of pressure. So their staff were being pressured to make money and everything. And then eventually they now started opening fictitious accounts, unauthorized customer accounts, moving money around. Eventually, when they got found, when the regulators reviewed, they got found, they got fined millions. They now had to settle customers who had their data breach. They had data breach and ended up with potential civil lawsuits, criminal. They lost customer loyalty, and then of course significant drop in share value, to the point that they almost got taken over recently as a result of of all of this that's happened. They are just starting to rebuild. So you can see that these things can happen in any industry, and we all need to be mindful that ESG risk management is not a nice to have, it is a must have, given all these things that can happen. Nike, I'm sure that Nike, unfortunately, Nike, even though this is, this was things that happened in 1990s, early 2000s, recently, Nike has just had some issues as well around, gender inclusion, with some of the way that their marketing and sales, as well as the fact that they feel that they're sexualizing children. So a lot of these things can happen. So they were using, some of their sweatshops and things were using child labor. So even though Nike would say that it's not directly them, but they didn't pay attention to what their suppliers were doing. They were using child labor. So, and even unsafe conditions throughout their supply chain. And once this broke, you can imagine what happened. And guess what? This is the 1990s and early 2000s. But last year, some of you may be aware of what happened to Nike. They were back in the news now with sexualizing children, and gender issues around gender as well. So these things happen, and with the rise of social media, these things come out a lot quicker. So they need to bear in mind. The other thing that Nike also had an issue with was the fact that the person that they were using as their brand ambassador as well was wrong. And so that caused a lot of backlash for their thing, and people were boycotting Nike. Even the whole Israel war that's going on as well, and the Jewish versus Palestine, there's a lot of controversies around this as well. So we all need to be, be mindful of some of these things, saying that, you know what, even though risk management may be seen as being remote, it's not as remote as you think. A lot of these things can affect you directly or indirectly, and we need to pay attention to it. So how do you mitigate? So I've got a few minutes left. So how to mitigate ESG risk? The first one, first of all, is actually to even identify and do an extensive ESG assessment. And all of this will be around making sure that it is specific to your organization. Like I mentioned to you earlier on, it has to be cross-departmental collaboration. Look at it, have targeted strategies around it, and how can you then make sure that the vulnerable areas, even the stakeholders that you're not thinking about, that you are doing that. Once all of that is identified, you now then develop and put ESG policies in place to adhere it. At the first instance, you might need the help of a consultant to do it because they have broad experience in that sense. You can also leverage on what other people in your industry have done. You have a number of organizations that do publish some of these policies. So you can look at it and then enhance them and tailor them to you. But make sure as you're doing it that these goals are SMART. I'm sure some of you know about the SMART goals. So making sure that it's specific, they're measurable, in that sense, and you can easily make sure that you, as you're quantifying them, there are also responsible parties in there. And then of course they must be time bound. So time bound in that sense. So is it a quarterly thing that you're looking at? Is it monthly? Is it daily? Is it yearly? Is it every 5 years? Some of these things, and you may need to refresh them. And of course, the last area is, of course, if it's not monitored or measured, then it's not really done. So you have to make sure that you have regular monitoring and reporting on ESG performance. And around here, of course, you have to make sure that the governance around it. So who is responsible for that, and making sure that you're compliant and nobody is window dressing some of the information that's coming out on there. So I'm done. Hopefully we have found it very useful, and you have a lot of food for thought and things that you can take away with that you can do in your organization. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, and thank you so much, Bolanle. Thank you. I think from the comments already, we can tell that people really had a great time and really enjoyed most of the examples. I can see Rukayat saying fantastic delivery. I can see Ugochukwu who said great examples to drive the points. So the floor is open now for Q&A. I think we have about 15 more minutes. So we should be able to take about three questions. So I'm just going to go to the Q&A button and see some of the questions that we have. So I see a question from Godson, and he says, should banks tie corporate lending to ESG goals in order to promote sustainable economic growth and adopt greener practices?
Okay, so my short answer is yes. So actually, quite a number of financial institutions are already doing this. So what they do is you build your sustainable finance framework, and then you now incorporate your lending activities to it, and then you now monitor it. So a lot of them are already doing that. And one of the things that you also have to consider is, even, let's be realistic. There's some industries where there'll be more impact than another, where there's, there might be degradation, like we said. So because of that, you have to look for mitigating factors. So what are the mitigating factors to help to compensate for some of these things? Does that mean that they commit to scholarship programs? Does that mean that they commit to planting trees? Does that mean that they commit to regular irrigation of the environment? Does that, so there might be things. Does that mean that they commit to helping up the industry itself? So those are the way that you can do that.
Okay. So I think we have another question. Just trying to get to that. Okay, Olatunji says, what will happen to our traditional rating agencies in the face of ESG reporting?
So I would tell you that a lot of the traditional ESG rating industry, they're not traditional anymore. They are evolving. I am aware of quite a few of them. So they are evolving. So there are a few organizations at the moment that are putting together risk parameters and risk rating parameters. So you have like, some of them have like 135 questions that people need to, and then it sort of gives you a scoring. So they're actually coming up with scorecards around it. So they are actually evolving at the moment, both local and ones overseas. They're already evolving because they know that they need to get with the program. Maybe not as fast as the ones that were in South Africa and UK, but we're getting there. So it's evolving.
Okay, thank you. So I don't think we have any additional questions, but we have some questions from before that okay, I see a question now in the chat box from Omobola, and they're asking, I have a question around the risk associated with geopolitical tensions. What would be a social or environmental risk, and how can large brands mitigate the risks that they could be exposed to, which are technically out of their control? I think that's it.
Yeah. So in the context of those three different buckets of risk, we have some that we call inherent risks, the ones that unfortunately is what it is, but there are mitigating factors. So first of all, you can model the risk. So if you have identified those ones, so for example, this geopolitical risk, you can model it. So for example, one of the ones that we're having now is we're having all these issues around inflation and exchange rates. You can model it. So remember that a lot of the things that we're doing around risk is not just the qualitative, there's also the quantitative aspect of the risk. I need to mention that. So you can model it. So how will it affect, what are the sensitivities around it? How will it affect your interest rates? How will it affect your revenue? How will it affect your cost? So if my people are affected by this thing, it will increase my staff cost. I can have immigration issues where I'm losing staff. So there might be issues around my quality of my work. What does that mean? Are there alternatives to even my inputs of my products? If I'm not getting the correct supply of the things that I have because of the fact that I cannot get Forex to get them, what alternatives can I do? And how long will my supply finish? So there's a lot of things that you need to do. So one of the things I mentioned earlier on was that with ESG and the practices and the synergies, it actually is an opportunity for us to actually robustly look at these things end-to-end long-term. So you will find that there's some organizations that can easily tell you that, in 7 months' time, we will run out of the supply of something. And because of that, we need an alternative. We need to find another producer somewhere in some countries to help it in that sense. The last thing I will add around this geopolitical, sort of type of things risk is that stress factor. So you need to be able to do stress testing in your business. How do you then stress your business to see how resilient you are? So for example, when COVID came, how quickly were you able to respond to it? And it's something that you need to get into the habit of doing as an organization. You cannot be reactive. You have to be proactive and prepare in advance.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I'd like to add to the second part of that question, please. The one around how can large brands mitigate the risk they could be exposed to. So risk regarding geopolitical tensions. I think a key thing, particularly for manufacturers, would be localizing their value chains, their supply chains. So we can't overemphasize the need for backward integration in Nigeria. It doesn't just help us mitigate the risk of these geopolitical tensions that disrupt supply chains, but it also helps in mitigating FX risk, because then you're sourcing within country. So I think that is important. And an example is for a program that we run, a presidential fertilizer initiative, where some of these inputs that are not produced or manufactured in Nigeria are being imported from other parts of the country in bulk, and then blenders take that from us. And during the Russia-Ukraine crisis, it affected, supply of potash, because that is where, we get our potash from. But again, obviously, these are things that we prepare for. So we had, other options like Canada and other areas that we're able to get that potash from. But even beyond that, now we're doing a backward integration and trying to set up, that manufacture. We're trying to backward integrate and manufacture that, locally, as opposed to just, relying on. I mean, that's always the plan, right? The short-term plan is to get it from these other places, but then in the long term, manufacture it, within country. So for us, for example, that was a practical, experience of how, that affected us, and the need for us to localize supply chain and backward integrate, our manufacturing processes, and as many processes as possible, not just manufacturing, agriculture, and all the others.
Thank you, Nana, for mentioning that.
Thank you so much,
and
Nana.
just to add to Nana, what Nana said, that is also a way of taking pressure away from the government. It's also a way of creating wealth, local wealth, where we're thinking, and also long term. Hopefully, if we are able to produce enough of these things, we can then export and create value for us as a nation. Thank you so much for mentioning that.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to try to fit 2 questions into the time that we have. Let's see how that's going to work. So I think the first question would go to Bolanle, and then we'll wrap up with the last question for Nana. So James Ebube says, most of the case studies that you presented on mismanagement focused on profit-making organizations. How does ESG reporting concern development partners such as NGOs, CSOs, and even donors? How can ESG risk, or what they're asking is, what risks should micro businesses or SMEs be thinking about?
Okay, thank you. For the NGOs, yes, I focus on profit making, but the truth about it is that for not-for-profit NGOs, the same risks actually apply, most of them. So the reason for that is because some of these people are giving you money. Yeah, you're collecting money from them. That you're already exposed to some of the risks that you're doing. You are supposedly doing good causes and investing in them, but once there's one reputational issue, so did anybody hear about what happened with Naomi Campbell? So those of you that so there was a situation that was, she had an NGO type of thing, and they found out that some of the money, the proceeds, were used incorrectly, and the reputation risk was very bad in that sense. So even as an NGO, you need to put in mitigating factors. So your governance chain, who approves what? Where does the money go? Can you measure the impact? I'm on the board of a few NGOs, and I can tell you that it's one of the things that's always affecting us, because we want to make sure. So there's some people that want to give us money that we don't collect money from. It's not because we don't need the money, but we know that if we're sending some children to school and the money is coming from somebody who is buying Rolls Royces, or the person was in a former political something, if that thing gets out, they will say that you are helping them with money laundering. So it also affects, in that sense, some of this. So you have to also identify and be very open to how you do it. So with your one, even though you're looking at impact, how are you able to measure the impact, but also your sources? Where are your resources coming from as well? You cannot ignore that. And then, of course, your governance channels, who approves what, who is involved with you, who's associated with your name, all those things are very important.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bolanle. And then the final question for Nana. So Chinwe Uche says, should an organization's regulatory compliance performance count as ESG performance in their sustainability report?
I mean, if it's compliance to ESG regulations, then why not? And even compliance to other regulations that are not ESG, because that also falls under the governance angle. So your compliance to general regulations, as well as your compliance to ESG or environmental and social specific regulations. But absolutely, because I mean, if you're not in compliance with national or regulations that are relevant to you, then it's a dent on your governance practice. So absolutely, your ESG focused regulations, as well as, the general things that or regulations that, within your industry and your business, you're expected to be in compliance with. So it would affect if you don't do that. And if you do it, it's a good thing for your, performance.
Okay, thank you so much, Nana, and thank you so much, Bolanle. I don't know if you have any final thoughts before we wrap up.
I mean, the only thing, maybe I'll say two things. If you haven't started, it's time to start and, take a structured approach to it. So starting in that sense. Then the second thing I wanted to say is that there's actually a lot of resources that can help you on your journey. It's just how you harness it in that sense. So don't be shy to ask for help. Look at what other people are doing, but make sure as you're doing these things, make sure it makes sense to you and tailor it to your organization. So those are the things I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. And Nana, any final thoughts?
I mean, Bonali touched on what it was I was going to say, which is, it's not a one size fits all. So don't just copy and paste. Don't just blindly, adopt everything that is out there. Ensure that it's your organization. Understand what, what your or how it adds value to your organization, because that also helps you in selling that to your management and to your board. If it's something that you're currently not doing and you want to implement, at that level, what is important to your board is value creation and value addition. So if you're able to identify that and tailor it to your business, and again, it's a journey, honestly. It's not a sprint. So start somewhere, as opposed to thinking, it's so big, where do I just start from where you are, and then you grow eventually and mature in that journey. So yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Nana, and thank you so much, Bolanle. Thank you to I think we still have about 120 people who are still on the call. So thank you so much to all the people who have been here with us since 10. It's almost 1 p.m. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nana, for giving us your time and sharing your expertise with us. Thank you, Bolanle, for returning once again to share more insights with our audience. And thank you to everyone, and most especially to our partners who have made this possible: the NGX, PwC, the UNIDO-ITPO office in Nigeria, the LBS Sustainability Center, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce, NECA, and of course, Sterling Bank. We really appreciate the effort that you've put into making this possible. We plan to have one more ESG session, one more webinar before to wrap up the year, probably in November or early December. So let's just keep the interactions going on. For those asking about the slides, that will be sent to the emails that you registered with. So once again, thank you so much, Bolanle, and thank you so much, Nana, for your time and for sharing these wonderful insights with us. So can I just ask that everyone in the room just gives a round of applause to our speakers today? I can't see. I feel people are tired. Okay, yes, now the applauses are rolling in. And then thank you so much to our partners who joined to give their goodwill messages. Do enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.